I have a couple of related breaking news stories for you coming out of my home country, the United States. The government shutdown and the aftermath of the shooting at the Mormon church in Michigan this weekend. So Republicans just shut down the government rather than keep millions from losing their health care. And while the White House frames the Michigan LDS shooting as, quote, another attack on Christians, what they're doing is gaslighting us and deflecting. And let me tell you why. Because when a country treats healthcare like a luxury, people snap. On September 28th, 2025, just this past weekend, a Marine veteran, Thomas Jacob Sanford, opened fire at a Mormon church in Grand Blanc, Michigan, after driving this truck. I'm sure you've all seen pictures of this Silverado, flags flying, into the building, killing 4 and injuring at least 8. Today is not about sensationalizing him. That's not what I want to do in this video. But I do want to shine a light on this system that keeps producing tragedies. And I can guarantee you, this is a conversation that the rich and powerful at the top do not want us to have today. So let's dive in. I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take 2. Hey everybody, I'm Jenny, and this is Life Take 2. I want to start off today by directing you down to the description where I have everything that you need to know to join my book club. I posted a video today about all the details for my Liberty Library. The first book, our October read, is completely free to you through my partner, Post Hypnotic Press, who is an independent, female-owned Audible Books company. Our book this month is Feminism is for Everybody by Bell Hooks, and all of the information is down below. I'll tell you one thing right now. I have felt so angry the past few days hearing the rhetoric out of the White House around this school shooting. Quotes by President Trump before we even knew who the shooter was or anything about him. Videos like this.
I want to express our sincere condolences to the victims and their families and all of the members of this church who were gathering on a Sunday in the United States of America to worship Jesus Christ. And a crazed gunman rammed his truck into the church and started firing at these innocent Americans. And as the president rightfully put in his Truth Social yesterday, this appears to be yet another targeted attack on Christians.
They're selling us a culture war. Christians are under attack. But this is class warfare again. In America, healthcare is for profit. People can't access care. Families crumble and a match hits dry brush. Poof. Disaster happens. This is about policy, not piety, not religion. My partner is a school teacher. Multiple times a year, he trains for a shooter. He just got back from an out-of-town, several-day-long shooter training thing with their full admin and staff just a couple of weeks ago. And when he tells me all of the details about what this training is, it just makes me mad that this is the type of world that I'm raising my children in, the type of world that my partner is going to work in. Here's some of the things that he learned. It's basically hand-to-hand combat. He learned how to grab a gun the right way if it's pointed at him, how to block a door while being shot at, how to hide children quickly so that they can be kept safe. That's the job now. That's what our teachers are learning. And he does this multiple times a year. He also sits in classes as part of this training and learns the data. Here's the non-shocking truth. Access to mental health care is out of reach for millions and millions of Americans. 1 in 4 adults with mental illness report unmet need. That's not a moral failing. That's a policy choice. I want to help you analyze and reframe the narrative that the people at the top are giving us right now. After Grand Blanc, officials said the shooter hated people of the Mormon faith. Maybe. I'm going to do some separate videos about that in a few weeks. But when we stop at motive and ignore the infrastructure, we miss the real story. There was no safety net for this man. No reliable mental health access. No stable, affordable care. The story of America is people falling through gaps big enough to swallow the Titanic. I decided today that I'd like to share with you some things that I never talk about on camera, and that's some of my medical issues. Most of my YouTube audience doesn't realize that I am a high-functioning disabled woman. My disability is an anoxic brain injury. I'm going to talk about how I acquired that brain injury here in just a minute. And while I do that, I'm going to dive into just my personal experience as a woman and a wife and a mother in America. In my videos, I've talked a lot about how that my ex-husband and I did really well financially, but we were not billionaires. We didn't have intergenerational wealth, and we didn't have a safety net. Both Jake and I were raised in poverty. So welcome once again to Jenny's Confessional Booth. Today, instead of diving into MAGA, we're going to talk about my health. When I was a young 20-year-old mom, I had my first baby. And at the time, Jake's job, he just had a regular job where he worked for somebody else, had insurance. So that birth was covered. I had all of the aftercare that I needed. He had a great pediatrician. We were able to take him in for all of his newborn and toddler care. When my first son was about 2 years old, he got his hand cut off in an escalator. The ambulance rushed him to the hospital. The surgeon reattached his fingers. He's had, 20 surgeries throughout his life, all of which have been paid for out of pocket. The surgeon at the hospital that the ambulance took us to wasn't on our policy. We were young newlyweds with a baby, and a few weeks after the surgery, we got a $50,000 bill in the mail. Our insurance never did pick up that bill. What happened was our surgeon wrote some of it off, and then we just made payments for months and months, while also at that time paying our insurance premiums every month. Then our insurance canceled us, and that was the last time that we would have insurance for decades. One of the reasons that we didn't have insurance is that we were self-employed. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, being self-employed, we would spend a fortune, thousands and thousands of dollars on our premiums, and then still have tons of copays and all kinds of out-of-pocket costs. And eventually my ex-husband just crunched the numbers, and he's like, we're just going to keep our fingers crossed and hope that nothing catastrophic happens, because paying insurance is in no way helping us financially. I would have 4 bio babies. We just paid for all of our babies out of pocket. Everything was completely out of pocket. I could afford the birth and then their shots and then some well care appointments. But at that point, we would have already racked up like $10, $20 plus $1,000. So that was about it. We didn't do any extra. So we had a lot of things that happened in our lives that just didn't get taken care of that would impact our health even up to this day. For instance, my little daughter broke her arm when she was in 2nd grade. She was just jumping on our backyard trampoline, and her arm hurt for days. So it took me 5 days before I took her to the hospital. And when I finally did, it was fractured, and she needed surgery, which cost a fortune. We cleaned out our savings account for that surgery. I never saw a doctor ever. Like, I went a decade and a half with my only medical care being my OBGYN. Whenever I had a baby, that was the only time that I ever had anything done. I never had an annual checkup or anything like that, which led to some major medical problems. I was a vegetarian for decades, and I had critically low iron and some other nutrients, and I didn't know because I couldn't afford labs. Same daughter that broke her arm also exhibited nut allergies, and we couldn't afford to take her to an allergist. So we just kind of guessed and kept our fingers crossed that she would never eat anything that she was anaphylactic to. We just treated everything with Benadryl. I wasn't able to afford to have EpiPens on hand. In 2013, I would find that I had an ovarian tumor, and it wasn't a checkup or anything like that that discovered the ovarian tumor. Nope, I didn't have a doctor. I was in a yoga class one day. I went into the downward dog pose, and because the tumor at that point was so heavy, inverting actually ripped it off of the little capillaries that were holding it to my abdominal wall at the end of my ovary, and it detached and caused unbelievably shocking pain that literally almost sent me into shock in the middle of my yoga class in Mesa, Arizona. So if I hadn't gone into downward dog that day, I don't know if they would have ever discovered that grapefruit-sized growth on the end of my ovary. So it's discovered that I have an ovarian tumor. It was benign. It wasn't going to kill me, but I did have a very complex surgery. And after the surgery, I caught a hospital-acquired infection called C. diff. And that is the reason that I had a near-death experience in 2013. Here's the picture of me the day that I shouldn't be alive, right? We didn't have insurance. I was fighting for my life. And as a result of all of this, we ended up with a medical bankruptcy. That medical bankruptcy is still impacting my life today. It destroyed our world. It made it impossible for us to buy a home and continue with our home building business. And so many other things were just absolutely annihilated by that tumor. So because of that and taking care of me while I was very ill for the years after that, we lost our business and everything. We were so poor, we qualified for state insurance. And for a whole year, we had dental and I could see the doctor. It was great. I had the best medical care of my life for that 1 year that we were ultra poor and had no income. When we started to make a little bit more money, we lost the insurance. I was still having abdominal pain. This was just the couple of years after that surgery. I was critically ill. After the surgery, I'd had sepsis, and it was very difficult for me to recover from that. But once our insurance was taken away and we were making a little bit more money, I couldn't afford to go see a doctor. Like, just to see my surgeon was like $2,000 out of pocket just for an appointment. So 2013, 2014, 2015 was this time frame, and I was having nonstop bowel obstructions, infections, diverticulitis, bloody diarrhea, pain. So much pain. I couldn't see a doctor. I wasn't able to eat. I was so dysfunctional during this time period, and every photo of me from this time, I'm just like stick skinny. My average weight for about 5-6 years was 102 pounds as a grown 40-year-old woman. And like, I'm kind of small, but that was about 20 pounds under my typical adult weight. And my liver was shutting down. I was constantly jaundiced. I was constantly vomiting. I was a disaster. So I joined doTERRA with all of my Mormon friends in my ward to fix my own medical problems with essential oils. It was all I had. You guys, I was fixing major medical problems with melaleuca oil. I had to go get my bottle of melaleuca oil for you. And I mean, it helped, but this is not going to fix the problems that I had going on there. And it's really sad looking back in the decade or so that I was actively doing doTERRA, how many other women came to me for essential oils because they didn't have medical care. So they're like, hey, I've read that oregano oil helps with strep throat, and I don't have insurance, and I think that my kids have strep throat, so I need to buy some because that's what Google said to do. Eventually, friends did a GoFund to pay for treatment for the C. diff that was then 3 years long, right? From that near-death experience until when the C. diff was finally treated, it was a 3-year time span because I wasn't able to get treatment. So my friend saved my life with a GoFundMe. I flew to Florida to a GI doctor there, and here I am today. I would not be alive today if a bunch of people hadn't GoFunded my medical care. Here's my question. What the fuck kind of a country needs crowdfunding for surgery? You guys, eventually my mental health deteriorated after decades of domestic violence. And I got to a point where I wanted to end my life daily. Every day I was just focusing on trying to mentally get through the day. My husband, even though we were making pretty good money at that time, wouldn't pay for therapy. And I didn't have insurance and I didn't have a job. I was just a stay-at-home mom. So I had my first attempt. Then Jake and I separated. And because we were separated, I then qualified for state insurance once again because I had zero income. I had nothing. First time in my life, I had a therapist, a mental health practitioner. I've talked about him in other videos. It was the most pivotal moment in my life, and it is why I am everything that I am today. Thank you, Nick, for saving my life. You changed my entire future and the future of my children and my grandchildren and everybody around me. And he's why I left the church and my abuser about 2 years later because of his intervention. Here comes the roller coaster. Then I lost my insurance again because I reconciled with Jake and moved back in with him for a little while. And I lost Nick and my medical team. Jake had gotten a new job, great income. And we had insurance the first few months, but then the company decided to drop the insurance for all like 300 or 400 employees. I was still in GI crisis, and my surgeons were starting to suspect that I needed surgery. But surgery would have cost me more than we made in a year. Then our marriage ended. December 2018. It's my life take 2 right here. 2 months after leaving the church and losing my entire family, I have not seen my parents, aunts, uncles, so many people since 2018. 2 months after my husband left, too, I found myself in a severe mental health crisis. I was pushed into a psychosis from the stress, the disorientation, an eviction notice. I was hungry. All of our food was coming from Catholic Charities because I hadn't had an income of my own. I couldn't afford to file for divorce, which was only like $199, but I didn't have that. So I couldn't get food stamps. I needed mental health care, and I knew that I needed mental health care. I remember calling my former therapist, Nick's office. He was in another state, and just asking him, can you just like unofficially help me over the phone? And he's like, there are so many layers of rules and regulations that preclude me from being able to do that. I had zero access to the mental health care that I knew that I needed. I had zero access to food. I had zero access to the medical care that I needed. I had zero access to a place to live. I had nothing. And the irony is we had been fairly well off, and I always thought that there were safety nets. Like if anything ever crashes, there's welfare. There's stuff that people get, right? There's not. There wasn't. I didn't get it. Nick told me that I should go to the ER. I called the ER and talked to them, told them that I felt like I was in mental health crisis, told them that I wanted to end my life. I called from a burner phone. I didn't give them my identity. And they told me that they didn't have any idea what it was going to cost. But yes, that if I came in, that I would probably be locked up for several days and that I would get the bill after that. I can still remember sitting on my bed in my master bedroom, just my hand shaking, feeling like I just wanted to sink into the earth and thinking to myself, the only option that I have for any type of help is to go to the ER. And then I end up with tens of thousands of dollars worth of medical bills. And I don't have a job. I'd been a stay-at-home mom my whole entire life. I already was losing my home and everything. Like that was the last thing I needed. And that actually kind of pushed me over the edge. I was rubbing lavender oil on my neck, doing yoga and listening to these Deepak Chopra meditations here on YouTube to treat psychosis because that was all I fucking had. On the day that would change my life forever, I called the suicide hotline. A grandma talked to me for about 40 minutes, and then she said, my shift is ending. That's all the time that I'm allowed to spend with somebody. And basically it was literally like, I hope that you have a good day. You will be okay. That's not an exaggeration. I don't know if that's what they're supposed to do, but she was like, you can hang up and call back and talk to somebody else, but I have to go. So I hung up, drove my Mercedes into my tiny garage, and woke up from a coma in the hospital the next day. That's why I'm called Life Take 2. By the way, the ambulance and the hospital went to collections, and I still get calls 7 years later. I think the last time that I got a call on my hospital bill from this event was just like a month ago. After that, an uncle and a couple of friends GoFunded so that I could pay for filing for divorce. And then I was getting divorced and I was poor enough for insurance once again. My little son, he was 9 years old at the time, was a soccer goalie. He was just ending up his soccer career. He had to quit playing soccer because I could no longer afford even to like buy him new cleats and shin pads. I couldn't pay for his soccer team anymore. But his very last game, he was struck in the jaw and he had a couple of teeth break off below the surface. So he needed some emergency dental care. I did have the access insurance to pay for it. But when we got to the oral surgeon that day, they had already sedated him. They had already injected him with all this stuff. And the lady at the front is like, hey, we have a $300 copay. And I had $29 in my bank account. That was it. And that $29 was going to need to buy me gas. I had no job. So I told her, I don't have $300. And I remember calling my ex-husband and like, hi, I'm at the dental office. Brody's already sedated. They've got to work on these teeth that just got broken off in the soccer thing. And he was like, fuck you. I'm not paying for anything. The oral surgeon did not do the surgery. They're like, well, if you can't pay the $300, then we can't do this today because you're not going to pay it later, lady. So they literally just waited for that to wear off. And then they didn't do that. Do you know when I finally had the ability to take care of those teeth? 2 years ago. My son is 16 now. When he was 14, I finally had dental coverage that covered that. Oh, I forgot one little detail. The oral surgeon was like, if you're not going to have those teeth extracted, then we at least need to put them on amoxicillin. So I drove to Walmart hoping that it was like a $4 copay because I only had $29 in my bank account. And it was like a $91 prescription. So again, I called my ex-husband. You wouldn't pay for the oral surgery this morning, but Brody has to have this amoxicillin. And my ex-husband was like, fuck you. And so I hung up and I paid for it on my debit card and I overdrew my account. And that overdrawing my account would cause financial catastrophe in my life until just 2 years ago. So during that whole time that I was homeless, it was actually really nice to be poor enough for insurance. During COVID, I didn't have to worry about hospital bills. I was hospitalized 7 times during COVID. I almost died. I had a 10-inch deep vein thrombosis. I've had 3 surgeries on my left leg, and I didn't have to worry about that. I could go to the hospital and have life-saving surgery, and it was paid for. My son broke his arm at the skate park, and I actually took him to the ER and got it x-rayed. I didn't wait around 5 days and just hope and pray that it wasn't broken and put essential oils on it to stop the pain and give him some Tylenol. I took him to the ER. It was broken. They put a cast on it. Then 2 years ago, so what was this, 11 years after the initial surgery, after 11 years of pain, of peeing and pooping blood, of nonstop bowel obstructions, diverticulitis, vomiting, diarrhea. I have been in pain for 11 years, right? Well, I had insurance, so I saw a surgeon. She did an exploratory surgery. It cut me open from here to here. I had staples all the way up. My belly button will never be the same. She cut out half of my colon, and she found that over the years since my initial surgery and with all of the infections and things, my bladder had grown onto my intestines. They were fused together, which isn't a good thing. That's one of the reasons why I was bleeding. I also had had a perforated bowel, which had led to all of this scar tissue and little pockets of abscesses throughout my lower abdomen because of a massive infection that I had had. I should be dead. And do you know why nobody knew that this was happening? I was in pain. I knew that I was sick, but I couldn't go to the hospital because I hadn't had insurance. My 22-year-old daughter has always had tummy trouble thanks to insurance during this time. She was diagnosed with severe celiac. It changed her life until she got a job and lost her insurance again. But at least now she has that celiac diagnosis and she's able to take care of that. So back to I'm a high-functioning disabled woman. My attempt on my life left me with a severe anoxic brain injury. My TikTok followers know this because I first started my TikTok when I was completely homebound, having nonstop seizures, many strokes, and all kinds of horrible problems. My kids put TikTok on my phone and I was at home having problems, being very sick, and now the hospital all the time. Here's the thing. It's not that there's not a treatment for my brain injury. I was under the care of a neurologist who was treating my brain injury. That's why I recovered to the point that I am today. so that you guys barely even know that I'm disabled. Only the people on this side of the camera know how my disability impacts me. I had to stop my treatment because my neurologist wasn't covered by my insurance, and I couldn't afford it. I just had $18,000 of treatment left. I still have $18,000 of treatment left. I'm still unable to get the medical care that I need because America. Do you know how many school shootings, how many violent crimes, how many horrific things that happen are preventable with appropriate mental health care, with appropriate health care, with appropriate nutrition, with housing and transportation and security and all of the things that people need? Maslow's whole hierarchy of needs, just shelter, food, purpose, people around us, is inaccessible for so many people. So many of these very public tragedies have people behind the scene, parents, roommates, spouses, clergy, whoever, that know that this person is in crisis and have no way to get them help. The lives of the working class in America have not improved at all in my lifetime, and I'm 51 years old. Bernie Sanders says we have two Americas, one for the rich, one for the poor. They're like completely different planets. That is the absolute truth. I couldn't afford $90 antibiotics for my son's dental infection. That overdrew my account. The sad thing is, my experience is not rare. Medical debt in the United States is at least $220 billion. About 15% of American households carry medical debt. The majority of personal bankruptcy filers report medical issues as a key cause. That's the water we're all swimming in. When care is profit maxed by the American profitariat class, two things explode: unmet mental health need and medical debt. Crowdfunding becomes a substitute safety net. Most of those GoFund campaigns don't ever meet their goals. Meanwhile, CEOs and shareholders, often their rich people planet, they're doing just fine and they have no idea and they don't care. This video here and my opinions around this topic, this isn't anti-Christian, it's pro-people. On the topic of pro-people, I am an atheist now, but I'll tell you this, the most Jesus-like thing I saw this week was members of the Mormon Church raising money for the shooter's family. The last time I checked, they'd raised over $200,000. So beautiful. But also, we shouldn't get to that point. This family shouldn't have had help. They shouldn't have had support. They shouldn't have had a safety net after the tragedy. Let's put that safety net in place so that these tragedies happen much less. But that type of compassion is not something that our policymakers extend to the sick, the poor, the middle class. Here's what we can do, because I always like to have homework for you. Locally, support community health clinics in any way that you can. Free dental days, school-based counselors. If there's any way that you can volunteer or contribute, then do. Number 2 is policy. Expand Medicaid where it's not expanded. Don't take it away. Let's have more. Cap out-of-pocket costs so that people's lives aren't financially destroyed by health debacles. Fund mobile crisis teams. Protect continuing coverage for kids. Every child in America should have medical care. My daughter should have had to go 5 days with a broken arm because we could not afford her surgery. Number 3, civic. Call your reps. Vote every cycle. Demand universal coverage. This should be a right for every American. It is ridiculous that America doesn't have medical care. My friend in Dubai that I'm going to talk about every single day because she just blows my mind every time I talk to her. She needed a prescription the other night, and at like 10 o'clock at night, she just got on the phone and ordered it for herself, and then it was delivered to her door for like 13 American dollars. It made me really mad. Also, if you do have extra, look for a local care fund so families don't have to gamble on GoFunds. There's so many different things out there. They shut the entire government down and told you to fight a culture war. I'm not fighting my neighbor. I'm fighting a system that lets families bleed out and then sends them to collections. Healthcare for all isn't radical. It's how we stop breaking people and prevent more churches from being blown up. Thanks for watching, guys. Please hit that subscribe button for me, share with a friend, and if you have a healthcare nightmare, tell us in the comments. Take care of yourselves.